Welcome to Capital Catch-Up, the podcast that breaks down what's happening on the Hill. I'm Victor.
And I'm Lainey. Today we're unpacking a packed docket. A dozen new bills, a slew of diplomatic and judicial nominations, and highlights from the past 3 days of the congressional record. Let's get into it.
Let's start with the Senate's agenda. The first item is Senate Bill 3062, which would require AI chatbots to verify a user's age and provide clear disclosures about data collection and the chatbot's capabilities. Lenny, why is this coming now?
The push reflects growing public concern that children are interacting with sophisticated language models without any safeguards. Age verification could curb exposure to inappropriate content and limit data harvesting. For tech companies, compliance would mean adding identity checks, perhaps through third-party services, or redesigning user interfaces to display required warnings. It's a classic example of regulation catching up to rapid innovation.
Moving on, Senate Bill 1552 aims to protect living organ donors from discrimination. What's the problem it addresses?
Living donors often face hurdles when applying for health insurance, life insurance, or even employment because insurers and employers may view them as higher risk. The bill would make it illegal to deny coverage or employment based on donor status, encouraging more people to consider donation and ultimately expanding the organ pool.
Next is Senate Bill 4343, which bars members of Congress convicted of certain felony sexual abuse offenses from receiving retirement benefits. That's a mouthful. What's the policy goal?
It's about accountability. Federal retirement benefits are a form of public pension. By stripping those benefits from officials who have committed serious crimes, Congress sends a clear message that misconduct carries real financial consequences, reinforcing public trust.
Senate Bill 4344 extends Section 702 of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act for 3 more years. The Senate passed it on April 17th, but Senator Ron Wyden warned that a straight extension is unacceptable without reforms. Can you explain the stakes?
Section 702 lets the government collect foreign intelligence from non-U.S. persons located abroad, but the data often sweeps up communications of Americans. Critics argue the law lacks a robust warrant requirement, raising Fourth Amendment concerns. Wyden's hold and subsequent lift highlights the tension between national security and civil liberties. Extending the provision without new oversight could keep the status quo, while reform could introduce stricter minimization or judicial review.
The Senate also considered House Resolution 8322, which extends the authorities of the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, essentially the same framework as Section 702, through April 30th, 2026. How does that differ from Senate Bill 4344?
House Resolution 8322 is a separate reauthorization of the broader FISA authorities, not just Section 702. It keeps the surveillance tools in place, while the debate over Section 702 reforms continues. In practice, both measures keep the intelligence community's existing powers intact for the near term.
Shifting to the House, let's talk about the Red Tape Act, House Resolution 6398. What does it propose?
The Red Tape Act targets regulatory inefficiency. It requires federal agencies to conduct cost-benefit analyses for new rules, set clear timelines for rulemaking, and eliminate duplicative requirements. The goal is to reduce compliance costs for businesses, especially small firms, and to speed up the rollout of needed regulations.
Complementing that is the Fences Act, House Resolution 6409. This one focuses on border security, right?
Correct. The Fences Act authorizes funding for additional physical barriers, surveillance technology, and staffing along the southern border. Proponents argue it will deter illegal crossings and drug trafficking, while opponents worry about environmental impact and the efficacy of walls versus comprehensive immigration reform.
The House also moved forward with House Resolution 1689, designating Haiti for Temporary Protected Status, TPS. Why is TPS significant for Haitians?
TPS provides a temporary legal foothold for nationals of a country experiencing extraordinary conditions, like natural disasters, armed conflict, or severe economic collapse. Haiti has endured a series of devastating earthquakes, hurricanes, and political turmoil. TPS would protect Haitian migrants already in the U.S. from deportation and grant work authorization, offering stability while the situation back home improves.
Let's not forget the Space Exploration Research Act, Senate Bill 2351. What's the thrust of that legislation?
Senate Bill 2351 establishes a coordinated research program to advance deep space exploration, including lunar habitats and Mars missions. It earmarks funding for partnerships between NASA, private industry, and academic institutions, aiming to keep the United States at the forefront of space science and to spur high-tech job creation.
The House also introduced a suite of more targeted bills. House Resolution 1 is a reconciliation act tied to House Concurrent Resolution 14. Can you unpack that?
Reconciliation is a budgetary process that allows certain fiscal measures to pass the Senate with a simple majority, bypassing the filibuster. House Resolution 1 packages spending cuts, tax changes, and policy adjustments that align with the broader fiscal goals outlined in House Concurrent Resolution 14. It's a fast-track way to implement the administration's budget priorities.
Then there's the Safer Transport Act, House Resolution 8267. What does it address?
SAFER stands for Secure and Accelerated Freight and Emergency Relief. The bill streamlines permitting for high-speed rail and freight corridors, and it creates a grant program for upgrading aging infrastructure. The intent is to reduce shipping bottlenecks, lower emissions, and improve disaster response logistics.
On the social safety side, we have the Senior Hunger Prevention Act of 2026, House Resolution 8256.
This act expands nutrition assistance for seniors, increasing funding for Meals on Wheels, and simplifying eligibility for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program (SNAP) for older adults. With the aging population growing, food insecurity among seniors is a pressing issue, and the bill aims to close that gap.
The American Lending Fairness Act, House Resolution 7866, targets lending discrimination. How does it propose to do that?
It strengthens the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's authority to enforce the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, adds data collection requirements for lenders, and imposes penalties for discriminatory practices. By increasing transparency, the bill hopes to level the playing field for borrowers of color and low-income households.
Turning to wildlife, House Resolution 6251 amends the Marine Mammal Protection Act to allow importation of polar bear trophies taken in Canada before the species was listed as threatened. What's the controversy?
Critics argue that allowing those trophies undermines conservation efforts and sends a mixed message about protecting polar bears, especially as climate change threatens their habitat. Supporters claim it respects historical hunting traditions and that the trophies were taken legally before the Endangered Species Act listing.
And House Resolution 4219 creates the National Wildlife Refuge System Invasive Species Strike Team Act of 2025. Why is that needed?
Invasive species like Asian carp or emerald ash borer damage ecosystems and cost billions in control efforts. The act establishes a coordinated strike team to respond quickly to new invasions, improve data sharing among agencies, and allocate emergency funding for eradication.
Let's shift to nominations. The Senate confirmed several diplomatic and judicial appointments. First, Todd Steggerda is nominated to be the U.S. representative to the United Nations and other international organizations in Geneva. What does that role entail?
Geneva hosts a cluster of UN agencies, World Health Organization, International Labor Organization, and others. The representative acts as the U.S. voice on global health, labor standards, and human rights. Steggerda's background in multilateral negotiations will shape how America engages on those fronts.
John Breslow is slated to become ambassador to Cyprus. Any geopolitical angles there?
Cyprus sits at the crossroads of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. The island remains divided between the Republic of Cyprus and the Turkish-occupied North. An ambassador can facilitate dialogue on energy exploration in the Eastern Mediterranean and support peace-building efforts.
We also have a cluster of judicial nominees: Andrew B. Davis for the Western District of Texas, Jeffrey M. Kuhlman, Anthony W. Mativi, Anthony J. Powell for the District of Kansas, and Justin D. Smith for the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals. Why is the composition of these courts important?
Federal judges serve lifetime appointments, shaping legal precedent on everything from civil rights to environmental regulation. The Senate's advise and consent role means each confirmation can shift the ideological balance of a court, influencing how laws, like the ones we just discussed, are interpreted down the line.
There are also a few high-profile diplomatic posts. Adam Cassidy as Ambassador at Large for Cyberspace and Digital Policy, Preston Wells Griffith, 3 to the UN office in Vienna and the International Atomic Energy Agency, and Yu Kim to the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. How do these roles fit into the broader foreign policy picture?
Cassidy will coordinate U.S. policy on cyber norms, election security, and digital trade, a rapidly evolving arena. Griffith's dual postings place him at the heart of nuclear non-proliferation talks and multilateral diplomacy in Europe. Kim's ASEAN role strengthens ties with Southeast Asia, a region of growing strategic importance amid China's rise.
Let's bring in the daily records for context. On April 17th, the Senate opened with a prayer and the Pledge of Allegiance, then debated House Resolution 8322 and Senate Bill 4344, as we mentioned. Senator Wyden lifted his hold on Colonel Thomas M. Sieverts, confirming his promotion to Brigadier General. That illustrates how individual senators can affect personnel decisions.
Exactly. Holds are a procedural tool. Senators can block a nomination to extract concessions or signal concerns. When Wyden lifted his hold, it cleared the way for the promotion, showing the interplay between policy debate and personnel oversight.
The House record for April 16th highlighted a House concurrent resolution directing the president to withdraw U.S. forces from hostilities with Iran. That's a significant assertion of congressional war powers authority.
Under the Constitution, only Congress can declare war, and the War Powers Resolution requires the president to consult Congress before committing troops. The concurrent resolution is a formal statement that the House believes the president has overstepped, urging a pullback. While it doesn't have the force of a law, it signals strong legislative opposition.
The same day, the House honored the Artemis II astronauts, celebrated a historic grocery store, and debated the Sudan genocide, calling for an arms embargo extension. It shows how the chamber balances symbolic recognitions with substantive policy work.
And on April 15th, the House, with Randy Fine serving as Speaker pro tempore, tackled air pollution concerns, the Epstein case, and a proposed congressional stock trading ban. The stock trading ban reflects growing public demand for ethics reforms after several members were caught profiting from insider information.
Before we wrap, let's briefly explain a few procedural terms for our listeners. A House resolution originates in the House and, if passed, becomes law after Senate approval and the President's signature. A Senate bill follows the same path but starts in the Senate. A House concurrent resolution expresses the sentiment of both chambers but doesn't have the force of law. It's often used for matters like directing the President on military actions. Reconciliation, as we saw with House Resolution 1, is a budget process that limits debate and prevents a filibuster in the Senate.
And holds are informal tools senators use to delay or block nominations. Lifts of holds, like Senator Wyden's, are newsworthy because they can clear the way for appointments that have been stalled.
To sum up, listeners should watch for 3 key developments in the coming weeks: the Senate's next vote on reforms to Section 702 and the broader FISA reauthorization, the House's progress on the Red Tape Act and the Fences Act, which could reshape business regulation and border security, and the confirmation hearings for the judicial nominees, especially those to the Eighth Circuit, which will influence appellate jurisprudence for decades.
That's it for today's deep dive. Thanks for joining us on Capital Catch-Up. We'll be back soon with more analysis of what's moving through Congress and how it affects everyday Americans.
Until next time, stay informed.